Tonight we have Brian Keith Dalton, Mr.deity, finally having my personal interaction with the Almighty God. Thank you very much for coming.
Sure.
Can you answer us some questions of, I believe, a next atheist, since I'm having this personal encounter?
I can, but I can't give you the secret handshake to get into heaven. So don't expect it.
Okay, I have seen some other sketches about gods asking for very weird ways of getting forgiven for so long not believing, and almost like being an atheist activist. So I don't know what I'm gonna have to go through. First of questions for God would be like, it's all about Jesus. Jesus has been very, I don't know, naughty this Christmas, and everybody wants to know, is Jesus really gay?
Well, I think people get confused on that because Jesus just loves everybody so much, and sometimes people can misinterpret that. He's very touchy. He's very hands-on. He likes to be, a little flirtatious sometimes, and sometimes, it gets to the point where people misinterpret. I personally, I don't. I try to stay out of his personal life because it's, quite frankly, it's a mess. But so I can't tell you about his sexuality or if he's even interested in that kind of thing. He loves around a lot. He's actually very lazy. Well, I hate calling him a god, but technically I have to because he's one third partner. But probably the laziest I've ever seen. He loves his Birkenstocks and his robes, and I think he goes commando most of the time. So the sexuality is, I have no idea, but I hope he's having a good time, whatever he's doing.
Yeah, I would ask if the reason he's not back yet is something about that gossip that he would maybe be in the lost in the desert with his cousin.
No, actually, the thing you should know is that I turned off my all-knowingness before the creation because it's a real bummer just knowing everything. Nothing's fun anymore. It ruins surprise parties at birthday time. It ruins the endings of M. Night Shyamalan movies, even the good one. And so I shut that down. But the reason Jesus hasn't come back yet is we just forgot to do it. We had planned it, and then when he resurrected, we were all so excited to see him again. He'd been away for 33 years. He wanted to go shopping because all of the clothes in his closet were completely out of date. He did keep the bell bottoms on my recommendation. I think that was smart because those are going to be timeless now. And the big collars maybe too. So we just got all excited, and then the date that we had planned for it, we just completely missed. So at that point, it just seems stupid to do. And do you really need it anyway? It just gets ugly with that whole Armageddon thing, and I wasn't sure how it was going to go. We actually did the whole lamb laying down with the lion thing, which worked for a few minutes, and then it got really really ugly. That poor lamb. It was a lot of blood, a lot of blood.
Can tell us a little bit about this fail
This what?
for Jesus to come back? What happened?
Well, my reminders didn't go off. I don't know if you use the reminders on the iPhone. I love the iPhone,
Okay.
but the reminders, I set up a reminder, and sometimes they just don't go off, or maybe you have your phone on silent. I think we all probably we did go see a movie, a really long movie. I can't remember what movie we saw. It might have been Sophie's Choice, and so we probably all kept our phones on silent, and then the notification comes and you just miss it. And then, the next thing you know, you're in the Middle Ages, and it just seems silly. Let's just let everyone do their thing. And, at that time, Allah had gotten Muhammad up and running, and, there was a lot of anger and clashing going on, which I always enjoy. So I wanted to see how that played out. And, it's, we're not very organized.
Any plans?
Sorry?
Any plans to come around?
Not at this point. No.
No.
No, I'm gonna let the people on Netflix and Amazon handle that with various shows, and they can see how that's going. And if it looks like it could work out, maybe we'll do it. But it's also very expensive, and we don't have a lot of cash up here. I think you know that. That's why I'm always asking people to donate and support the program. But
I
yeah,
Yeah, it's complicated. It would not be kind of like you fixing all the problem. You could just send Jesus back at this conflictuous moment and then tell everybody to stop fighting. Here, there is the only God, and unify everyone. What is the thing with not stepping in this chaos of everybody has a different God and fight for it?
well, I don't know if you've noticed, but I haven't stepped in forever. I mean, you guys have been around hundreds of thousands of years, and I really, if I were gonna, that's another thing. I mean, I got to you guys late. I was playing golf with Zeus. We were on the back nine. He had hit this wild ball way out, and he tries to cheat all the time. I wouldn't let him, so he got upset. We had words. It got ugly. I got upset. I forgot. I was supposed to give you guys the 10 Commandments like hundreds of thousands of years ago, and it just slipped my mind. And then all of a sudden, oh, crap! Oh, myself! I have to get these to the people, and that's why that happened so late. But I'm not a very hands-on deity. I'm not fond of your species, quite frankly. A lot of people think that I created the world for you guys. But to be honest, I'm actually interested in a species that will come about in about 2.5 billion years in another galaxy way far away. So I try to do what I can for you people, but you're not my priority.
Was that more a prototype?
Yes, humans were very much a prototype. We didn't.
So you just testing here, watching. It is a little saddle, no? Like to just watch people doing all those stuff. Like
Well, I really want
could
you
not
guys.
just send a message like I'm not all that powerful.
Yeah, they don't. Even when I tell people things, they don't. They reinterpret it and they massage it into whatever they want it to be. And you people are awful, quite frankly. I mean, I'm not
This
really.
is amazing. Thank you very much. I appreciate very much to have Mr.deity here talking to us, guys. And you can go back to Brian. I think you can let God go back to his relaxing time.
I have my forbidden fruit here that I'm trying to get a little energy in here. So good.
Nice. So let's talk a little bit about all the series, because Mr.deity is in fact a production company. It's not just Mr.deity. There are so many series and it's such a long career. Could you introduce us just a little bit of how you became an atheist and how you became Mr.deity?
Yeah, well, I became an atheist back in the early 90s. I was a Mormon. I grew up Mormon, and I consider myself a foreman now, which is a former Mormon. That's my term. If you use it, you got to pay the royalties. And I just started looking into things because I realized I don't really know the other side of that story. And I actually went to the library and got a book out and started reading about atheism. And I thought, oh my heck, that's a Mormon phrase, by the way. Oh my heck, I don't think we have the best arguments anymore. And I freaked out a little bit because I didn't want to be an atheist. I didn't have the right clothes, or I didn't have shag carpeting, and I didn't like the taste of babies. So I really didn't want to be an atheist, but I couldn't figure out a way around it. I almost converted to Judaism and then Catholicism, but neither of those were going to work for me. I was concerned about my daughter. I had a three-year-old at the time. And I was still under the delusion that you couldn't teach morality without religion, but that ended up working out great. Mr.deity started when I had done a movie in 2002 that did well on the festival circuit, and we were trying to get money to remake that movie because it was very cheaply done, and we had a lot of interest in it. It just looked awful, and so we thought we'd start Mr.deity and see if we could make a little name for ourselves. So maybe we could get some money, because that's what you need in Hollywood to get any money. It's some kind of name. And so we posted them, the first 3, I think, on one day, and then, within a few months, we got mentioned on Dig and Reddit, and then we started getting views, and then YouTube put us on the front page, and we started getting more views, and then the next thing you know, Sony and Mosaic and various companies are calling, and we ended up going with Sony for the second season, which turned out to be not great for us, but they let us have the show back, and I've been doing that ever since, off and on. It's harder to do now because all of the actors are generally gone or uninterested or too busy or anything like that. But I am retooling. I'm actually going to shoot a new Mr.deity this month. I've figured out a way to do it. I think it'll be fun.
That's pretty nice to hear. So is that the issue why you don't have a season 2 Mr.deity on the playlist?
Yes, because they wouldn't let us post it on YouTube, only on their site called, Crackle.
Okay, we are just experiencing a little delay or something like this.
Right.
It's okay. Okay. Yeah, no, I've noticed. So Mr.deity itself, the series, have 6 seasons. Did everything start was like is all the story of becoming the Mr.deity was 13 years ago, as long as old as the YouTube channel?
Yeah. And then I made a terrible mistake with season 4, which was I did a prequel season where it was everything that happened before the Big Bang, which was difficult because there was no source material. I just had to make everything up. For the rest of it, I've got source material. I can just go to this big book and look at things and go, yeah, we'll make one about that. But the big problem that I did was I made them sequential. So if you didn't watch the one before, you wouldn't get necessarily the one that came after. And people weren't used to watching the show like that. And we lost a lot of people who were watching during that 4th season. It was a bit of a disaster, but we started a show called Words for a little bit that we were doing in between Sony deciding that they didn't want to do it and we didn't want to do it. It was kind of a mutual thing. So we started Words. And then I started doing these Way of the Mister videos. And so I've been doing a lot of that ever since. I started a series on atheism called The God.
Yeah, the Ways of the Mister is the one that has like more than 110 videos, I think, the playlist itself.
I don't
know. It's big. Yeah, it's pretty big. So we have 6 seasons of Mr.deity. You only can find 5 on the YouTube channel.
Right.
But then you have the ways of the Mister. That is the big one that you have still going through and always putting up new videos. There is Mr.deity and you have several videos about politics and other issues, culture war, and the things that we talk online. And I don't know how is I see the old videos have like over 500,000 views, and I particularly love the Prager FU series. It's really good. I think, yeah, we need to speak all this nonsensical coming from PragerU and other apologetics.
Right.
Try to make sense and talk about religious morality as something that is not so bad and arbitrary and subjective as any other religion. So one of the seasons that I enjoy the most, and I think it's important to point to people so they can go back. They are the first season, 13 years ago. It's not necessarily sequential, the episodes, but they are all so good. just love them so much. My favorite episodes come from the first season, and I'm always sharing, resharing. I have a folder on here on this YouTube channel that you go direct to Mr.deity channel. It's just
Nice.
I normally save it, and you guys can check my favorite ones. That is like we can go a little bit on. I made a list of the first season, the episodes, and we can maybe talk a little bit about those topics. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's say the first episode that you actually talked to Larry, that would be the great Holy Spirit, would be the one that you make evil. You choose the evil of the world, and I love that because it is one of the questions that so many big names on atheists have talked about. It's like, how dare you, almost greater,
Okay.
how dare you but all these evil things, natural disasters, defective people, the evil on people. So I remember Stephen Fry, that he is the one that has a perfect quote talking about how dare you kill little kids, put cancer in kids and everything. What is your approach as Brian, not Mr. Deity?
Well, I mean, I pretty much agree with Stephen and Christopher Hitchens and all of that kind of stuff. It's just a ridiculous idea that there's an all-loving God who creates a world filled with evil. I mean, Christians and religious people in general get themselves twisted in knots, like pretzels, trying to work that one out and make it work. You could make it work if you didn't have all power and all knowledge. You could maybe make that work, but if you've got all power and all knowledge and you're a loving being, you certainly don't create a place like this. I mean, it's just a ridiculous. So in that first episode, one of the things that we were kind of pointing out is that we don't have perfect free will. We don't have all of the choices that you could possibly have. I can't wish you harm, for instance, or I can't cause a void to open up underneath you and just make you disappear. There's all kinds of things where God limited our choices, and you realize he limited the evil we can do. So if he limited the evil we can do in some way, why wouldn't he limit it all the way? Because all you need is the tiniest morsel of free will if you're going to test people to see what they will choose, which is ridiculous in the first place if he's all-knowing, because he knows what you're going to choose, which is why I've been saying for 25 years, if you're an all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful God, you just create heaven for the people who would have ended up in heaven and create them and leave everybody else non-existent. You don't create a hell for them so that they can be tortured forever. The whole thing is beyond ridiculous, and it's morally repulsive in just about every way.
Yeah, all the incoherences in the Bible that the believers just look over, and it's such a huge cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Um, in the second episode, it's a funny approach with Jesus about the big favor of being Jesus and going through all that sacrifice and almost being dishonest or fooling Jesus at some point.
Yeah.
But talking about like the practicality of all the fantastic history in the Bible, the fantastic story of Jesus, they want to say that it has some historical fact in that, but sorry, I said history is not was not my intention. The entire story on Jesus' death and resurrection that also doesn't have any evidence. It would not make sense, and I think a little bit what you try to approach there could be wrong. It's like, okay, if I'm gonna die, if I'm gonna resurrect in 3 days, it seems not a real death. So
Yeah, there's that, and the idea behind that episode was basically, if you're trying to find someone to go down and save humanity, it's a hard sell. I mean, here's what you got to do. You got to live a sinless life, and then you have to go, hang on the cross for 6 or 7 hours, which is not fun. You got to sweat blood in Gethsemane and all that kind of stuff, which we didn't even get into. And the the direction that I gave Sean Douglas, who plays Jesus on the show, was that, you're not my first choice. So in other words, it's more like a casting session, and that's how I saw the deity cosmography, is that he's basically an independent Hollywood producer who can never get the budget that he wants, and he has a lot of great ideas, but not a lot of follow through, and so he Jimmy rigs everything. And that's the explanation for why this universe is so awful, is because it's put together by somebody who just doesn't have the resources or talent or follow through to do it right. But with regard to Jesus, I just thought it was funny because he does make the point, why don't you just do it yourself? In which he says, well, I'm not afraid, I'm not chicken. And then he asks him, why don't you just forgive? Which really is the big question. Why does God need a blood sacrifice of a God? He needs a God to go down and spill his blood to forgive. It's the weirdest thing. It makes sense in that kind of wacky culture. Yeah. Yes, in that wacky culture, it kind of makes sense. But if you're thinking about a transcendent being, you realize he could just forgive. He could just say, okay, if you're sincere and you really regret doing it and you learned your lesson, I'll just forgive you. And he would know if you're sincere and all of that kind of stuff. So all of it's just so silly. It's just
to not even talk about he was forgiving a sin that was Adam and Eve. And since we have pretty much proved evolution, we don't need Jesus to die for the sins of Adam and Eve that did not need to exist.
Right.
But I like your explanation of the Jesus not being that Jesse not being the first option, because it also portrays a little bit of historical Jesus, if he did exist, that apparently there were a lot of people trying to be the Messiah.
Sure.
So it was a casting. Who is going to do it best?
You couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting a Messiah back in the day. So, exactly.
The episode 3 is the light, and it's hilarious. It's to make the light with the clapping and all the jokes you put inside was fantastic. But let's talk about how there is a very interesting joke in their own Bible, in their own holy book. There is the joke about to be light, because actually God would have made light before the sun, a few days before the sun. So
right. So he obviously had a big 20K Fresnel that he rented from a movie, room, a set. I don't know where he gets that, where he gets the light. Yeah, it's a great point. All of that's so silly as well. I mean, the
I
idea
love it.
Creating a woman from the rib of a man, is just, people. The funny thing to me is that Christians will laugh at other origin stories. You know what I mean? I mean, if you take any of the other religions' origin stories, they think, oh my God, that's so ridiculous. That's insane. If you talk about the Rainbow Bridge or,
Brazilians are very Catholics, and they make jokes of African sects and evangelicals all the time.
Right. So it's just, if they look at their own, I mean, that's really what religion is. It's just a bunch of special pleading. Mine's okay, but yours is absolutely ridiculous. I
always say how it is religious. The religious feeling works into this egocentric feeling that religious people are raised around. It was always about like very selfishness. I think you even mentioned as Mr.deity in one of the episodes how it's like these people think I made everything for them. It's just like it's so selfish,
Right.
Even think about the size and the proportion of the world, the universe itself. I think it is silly, it is infantile to think that everything was made just for you. It is very mythical, fairy tale.
Of course, right. Yeah. And, we've made the point on the show that I made with you earlier, there's a good chance that if you acknowledge evolution, which I think you have to as a rational human being,
Yeah.
why do you think this is the point at which God was looking to stop things? Are we really that wonderful that, God said, oh, let's stop it here? Or could it be that maybe even that God created the universe, if God created the universe, for a species that has been extinct for, 2 billion years on some other planet in some other galaxy far, far away? Maybe it's the whole Star Wars, universe that God was really interested in, and ours, maybe he's even left the scene. It's like, okay, I'll let the universe continue, but whatever. It's there's just so
Yeah,
much.
it would make more sense.
Yeah.
It would make more sense. He made everything and just zap out to another galaxy, and like, I don't want to see these people doing this because it's not a good creation.
Yeah.
And go to another place, another galaxy, and try again, like you said. But also the thing of like creating itself, it would be like, but where did they come from? Because everybody feels so skeptical about the idea of everything came from nothing. But for some reason, it makes sense. A super powerful being, supernatural, and much more complex than everything, come from nothing to make everything. And it's like, that is what doesn't make sense in their philosophical exercise. But they never try. They always stop there. They start with assumptions, with their religious. Everything came from someone, and it's like, yeah, that is what is wrong, and you should not do that first statement. But very, very interesting. I think it's a little bit on the God would not also make us the way that we are, because I think in one of these, when you receive Richard Dawkins, that he actually exposed a little bit how nature is not perfect in reality as we seem to perceive into our eyes. We look everything and we think everything is working well and it's perfect, is in this ideal way, and it's not. It's almost like in the Platonic sense of like, there is an ideal, maybe there is an ideal human, but we are not that.
Yeah, I think the other piece of that puzzle is also how just narrow-minded we are in terms of, you know, yeah, everything's working well for humans here in the first world where we have technology and science and all that kind of stuff. But, there's still huge parts of the world where people are dying, routinely before they hit, 13. And their lives are just filled with suffering and misery, and it's horrible and it's awful. And those are the things that we've been able to distance ourselves from, thanks to science and technology and all of that kind of stuff. But they make us forget how crappy this world has been for a very long time, and how cruel, and just, anyone that thinks that there's someone up there watching and caring about us has to be just so completely ignorant of history and and the human experience that it's almost not worth talking to them. I mean, you have to remedially educate them first on the history of the planet to even get to have any hope of changing that kind of mind.
But I think it is a little bit on the religious psychological exercise of like, oh, the evil exists, is not my personal problem. They don't take that, they don't empathize honestly with that. So they think it's like, even when close relationships problems close to them, they're like, I'm gonna pray for you. It's so easy. It
Right.
is selfish in that, and it's like, and also the way that the praying is just making them feeling good that they are doing something, and that's why we see those disasters or even terrorist attacks, and everybody's just starts those chains of prayers. It's like, for what?
Right.
Virtual.
Right.
And and so the episode 4 was exactly about the prayers. That, in fact, is my favorite episode
Well,
because it just makes sense that God would be like that.
right.
Do you have your favorite episode? Do you have the favorite or the worst? Like one that you're proud and one that you're ashamed? Something like that.
Thankfully, I don't have anything that I'm really ashamed of. On some of them, I'm unhappy with the quality because we shot them when I was sick, or my performance is just so lackluster or something like that. But I had to get stuff up and out, and that's what you do. My personal favorite episode in terms of the writing is called Mr.deity and the Really Hard Time, where we're trying to figure out how to create time, because that's a difficult thing. You if you don't have time, you can't really create time, and we're trying to figure out how to start from nothing, because as Timmy says, even when it was just you, it was something. So even if you do have a god, this big G god of Aquinas, you're still starting out with something. So there's never really nothing. And, that may be the case for the universe just in general, in terms of who knows where our universe came from. Maybe it came out of another universe that existed before that, which perhaps there's an eternal regress on everything, and that everything has existed forever. And I don't see why not, or at least certainly matter. And I don't see why not. If you're allowed to say that God existed forever, you can, and we don't even know if God exists, you can certainly say that matter existed forever when we know matter exists. So it's a fun episode because it's very much like an Abbott and Costello routine where everything is bing, bang, bing. What kind of time do we need? Just some time. And any time? Yeah. How long do we have to do this? Well, the guys are working overtime. So it's just a big play on words, and it's a fun episode. And I
It
love the
is.
performances of Jimbo and Jarrett, who played Timmy on the show back in the day.
Yeah, I keep thinking of like when you mentioned when in the show people confront God, Mr. Deity with like, but where were you? And you're like completely clueless, like just the void. And I say, but what you're doing there? It's like, that actually was my first question when I was like, I don't know, 6, and someone told me there was a God that created everything, and before that there was nothing. I was like, okay, so this super powerful God, what was he doing before? Like in the middle of nothing, like playing, like floating in this space. What my idea was like, he's floating on the space all by himself. Oh, but there was nothing. So it's like empty space. And that was my question for a long time. Every time people would talk about creation and the creator itself.
Well, that's the thing about God is that you're talking about a being who is completely inconceivable in terms of our ability to understand what we're talking about when we talk about God, because he is an immaterial being living outside time. What the heck does that mean? And he's a personal being. So what does that mean to be a personal being living outside time? We did an episode where Mr. Deity turns his all-knowingness back on because he realizes how stupid he is without it. And then he's super smart, but he knows everything everyone's going to say. So Lucy's trying to have a conversation with him, and she can only get like the first word out before he cuts her off, because he knows exactly what she's going to say, and he just answers
Pretty
it.
good.
And that's the way one would imagine it would be, like being with an all-knowing being. But the first episode of season 4 was probably the most difficult episode I ever wrote, because, as I said, it was everything that came before the Big Bang. And in that episode in particular, Mr. Deity comes out of the void. His parents are null and void, and he decides that he doesn't want to be alone anymore, and he wants to do something. He's not sure what he wants to do, but he knows he's got to get out of this nothingness, and so he breaks out, basically. But writing that episode was so difficult, because where is the story in a timeless, eternal being existing in a void of nothingness outside time? I mean, without time, nothing can happen. So, it's The whole
He's
thing is just so
trapped.
silly. But that episode was so hard to write, and it took me probably 6 months. I spent so much time on that. What we ended up doing was kind of Amy just did voiceover where she tells a story about Mr.deity existing in the void, and how he got bored with it, and he realized he had to shut off his all-knowingness because it just ruined everything. And then he comes out of the void, and the last shot is a kind of an homage to 2001: A Space Odyssey at the end with the big, you know, that kind of stuff. So that's one of my favorite episodes. So hard to get it out.
That's nice. So you mentioned Amy. She is introduced in the fifth, or more like, not that she is introduced, maybe she has showed up before, but on the fifth episode is the episode Mr.deity and Lucifer. And it's she confronts you with the thing that I imagine would be a feminist fight. Why God has this thing against woman? Why he diminishes woman? Why women have not equal rights according to the Bible, even if there are people that want to use the Bible to say God. what is his thing with this, with woman itself?
Yeah, well, and it seems that every religion, every creation story, ultimately, I mean, I don't know them all, obviously, but I know enough of them to know that somehow they all pin evil coming into the world on a woman, which I think is just, I mean, you know, that's how you know who was writing what. It certainly wasn't the ladies writing this crap. But in that episode, we're also having fun with the fact that, you know, she's upset that she doesn't get any of the good mascots. That it's all about the mascots, and we've taken all the good ones in her mind, and she's left with the goat. I think is what we had with the thing with the horns. She says at the end, she's not happy with that. Yeah, and it's just more about the misogyny of religion, and I mean anything that evolved or came about thousands and thousands of years ago at the infancy of our intellect is going to be misogynistic, because that's just the way the world was. You know, it's just the way things were. Interestingly enough, you know, I finished reading this year Sapiens, and there were some very interesting insights about how much more egalitarian. Where'd she go? There she go. How much more egalitarian the world was when we were hunter-gatherers versus, you know, agriculturalists. So it's fascinating. It's all fascinating stuff.
Yeah. I always saw the Bible because I had a period of religious, like, oh, Bible would be an amazing book, but I never had actually opened it. And then at some point I was so curious about just keep repeating that and not really knowing anything about it. So I decided to read, and I was scared. I was so impressed, scared of it, of like, my God, I was so ashamed to have said that it must be a moral book because it's the Holy Bible. So I would say, like, it's the Holy Bible, so it's good because it's the Word of God. And never really went there and checked. When I opened it and started reading, I was like, okay, maybe it's a moral guide to show what you're supposed to not do.
Right.
I start trying to apologize about it, to be apologetic when I start reading. So I was like, no, it's just showing you bad examples of things you're supposed to not to do.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And then later I would like evolve to like, oh no, maybe it's kind of a penal code of the period, and that's why it sounds misogynistic and bad in a lot of sense and morals, because it just evolved with people. I was like, no, this was just people writing things, and we took as serious as words of God. Then I changed my mind. That is the exercise of trying to keep in the religious and keep in the community. I don't know. I passed through a lot of this on going out of religious because you were very attached to the community. Can you tell us a little bit about this, of the breakup of
Uh,
coming out of religious?
well, it actually ended up being a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I mean, I wrote my letter of resignation, which is what you kind of have to do when you're Mormon, saying take my name officially off the books and everything. And I took it to my bishop, and it was in an envelope, and I handed it to him, and I thought he would open it up and read it right there, and he didn't. And so I ended up going, and then I expected someone would reach out to me, because Mormons go after the sheep. But, I had been thinking for a while and causing some trouble at church just a little bit. So I think they were very happy to see me go. And they just said, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And it was very easy. I mean, emotionally, it was very traumatic for me because I lost all my friends, and I lost business contacts because Mormons are very insular and they do business with each other. And, there was a lot of, luckily I didn't have any family ostracizing me or anything like that. That went well. Some do. Some Mormons do.
That's nice. Yes. Yeah. So a little bit on the cancel culture that is still exists nowadays, I guess.
Yeah,
Have you suffered from something like that? Cancel culture?
a little bit. Yeah, I've gotten myself into trouble. One of the funny things to me is that I think in season 3 I did some episodes that were based on the misogyny of the God that I'm parodying. And, people were getting so upset about how misogynistic the humor was in those. And to me, it was just a function of the being that I'm parodying, but somehow it got placed onto me, and I took some heat for that. I'm not. I've made quite a number of videos on. It just amazes me that people get so obsessed with purity and everyone has to think the same. It's a very totalitarian idea where we all have to agree on these things, and if you don't agree with me, you're pure evil. That's one of the things I left religion for. I don't like this whole thing. I mean, I did a Way of the Mister about some guy who wrote an article saying I'm breaking up with Richard Dawson or Dawson Dawkins. That's a joke from the actual episode. I'm breaking up with Richard Dawkins, to which I said, he wasn't your boyfriend. I don't know what do you expect of people? You're not going to agree with everybody on everything. And the fact that people will write off somebody with whom they agree with on 80% of things. I just released a video where I mentioned Sam Harris in the beginning. And I don't agree with Sam on everything, but I think he's a worthwhile thinker. I think he's an interesting person. Yeah. Where I don't agree, I'll just say I don't agree. I don't need to write him off. I don't need to tell people he's a bad guy because he doesn't agree with me on this. We all develop and grow intellectually and culturally and emotionally at different rates and at a different pace. And I wish people would just reach out to others with whom they disagree and try to have a dialogue instead of this, go screw yourself kind of thing. It's very religious. That's the irony of it. It's incredibly religious. I'm going to excommunicate you. And I think people who have never been religious don't get how religious that is.
Yeah. Yes. Those are discussions that need to be more focused on the atheist agenda, to show religious people that like to strawman atheists, as atheists want to burn all the religious books and burn all the Bibles. It's like, no, we want you guys to open your Bibles, read the atrocities that are inside, and see that is not a good book to rely for morality.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
I do think getting an understanding of other religions also is helpful in starting to realize that, oh, wait, mine's just another one of these. It's not so wonderful and special. They have their rituals, and they have their creation stories, and they have their stuff too. And
the episode 6 is the press conference, which is important for Brazilians because Brazilians are very religious and love soccer. and
Right.
they fight, they kill each other for those two
Right.
things, and they mesh all together. And I guess God doesn't really pick a side, doesn't stick. I guess he likes who is winning or something like that. What is the thing with God and
Well,
the
it's so
teams?
silly to think that God would care about a sporting event. I mean, it's just. I mean, if he doesn't care about the kids starving, in sub-Saharan Africa, he's not going to take care of that. But he's going to make sure your team wins. It's another example of just such utter arrogance and just a lack of thought in terms of who we are and what happens here on the planet to people who aren't like us.
Little controversial one was the seventh episode when you made the tour de hell with Lucy. Apparently, God just committed a mistake. It was not people to go to hell, was the people to do well, and you apparently just
Right.
let's say like condemned the LGBTQ community and the Jews. Is that what happened? Like just a big mistake.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If you turn off your all-knowingness, a lot of stuff can go wrong really quickly, very badly. And I always like the thought of how
I love how it makes sense.
it makes much more
They
sense
are
than
really doing well. And
yes,
that's really
right,
right. It's like
right, right.
the commandments is the eighth episode, but I wanted to use that as a topic to talk about on cultural relativism.
Well, I probably made, if you look through my videos in total, I think I've probably made more videos on morality and the idea of objective morality than any
Yeah.
other thing. I think religious morality, I think the divine command theory of morality is probably the worst way to come up with morality because it sets something in stone, presuming that we know everything we need to know. And the fact is, we learn things and then we change our morality as we learn. But if you say, oh no, this is the morality we all need to cling to, and it was created by a bunch of idiots 4,000 years ago who didn't know where the sun went at night, you've got some real problems. Because, when you know things like we know things now, you're going to be far more morally advanced. I always ask people when they talk about morality like this, and I'm in a personal conversation with them, I say, do you honestly believe that the morality of 4,000 years ago is better than the morality that we have today? And if they think about it, they'll say, well, no. And I say, well, that's really all you need to know. It's like, we got rid of slavery. That was okay back then. We don't treat women like property, which is what they did then. We don't kill our homosexuals today. That's what they did then. It's so objectively more moral now in terms of how we treat people than it was 4,000 years ago when they were talking to God and getting their instructions directly from him. So that to me is kind of that closes the door on that chapter. But I think religious morality is the worst possible morality that we can have because it's regressive. It's regressive and it stagnates. It stops moral progress, which is what they've been trying to do forever. I mean, if you look at all of the moral progress that we've made, at every turn, the religious are fighting it. The latest example being equality for the LGBTQ community. They fought that tooth and nail, and they always have at every turn.
They still have issues with it. And that was a little bit exposed with this Jesus Gay on Netflix, I believe, because there was this movement of all religions and church trying to go over the LGBT community and trying to bring them back and say like, oh, it's okay. We don't judge the sinner. We just hate the sin.
Right.
And but now when you put Jesus Gay, all their masks just fell down and they were like, oh no, that is the worst thing, this is evil, I'm so offended, be violent, try to set fire on the Porta dos Fundos in Brazil on Christmas night. And that I think shows a little bit of everything we talked about here, of their intolerance, of their prejudice, of their
Yep.
arbitrary and very subjective morals.
Christianity is the worst, really, in this regard, because particularly evangelical Christianity, which argues that you are saved solely by what you believe, that what you do has no bearing on your salvation. Because at that point, what you believe becomes the most important thing. And if somebody is going to talk one of your kids out of believing the right thing, well, they become an existential threat to your child, at which point you can justify doing just about anything you want to them, which is what happened for hundreds of years in Christian Europe. So you really have just a conglomerate of pernicious ideas and horrible thinking that really kept us down for a very long time in terms of moral progress.
Yeah, definitely. And I have friends that are not like new generation, are actually millennials that have been indoctrinated so far that is like I that they don't celebrate Halloween because it's evil evil party, something like that.
Right, right.
It's interesting. So 9 episode of the first season is the book. And I like always to talk about how most of religious people nowadays is still trying to bring up, oh no, but Jesus came and forget the old book.
Yeah.
And I always try to bring like, but in the own book, in the whole Bible, Jesus says not once, more than once. He actually says that the scripture should not be broken, and that he did not come to abolish the old laws and prophets, but in fact to fulfill them. And that's another thing that I think is very interesting when you talk with religious people and how they're what do you think is that? Is like a kind of like an old book denier?
Yeah, they do try to write off the Hebrew Bible, because I think it's a tell. It's a tell. They know how awful it is. That they don't want to have anything to do with that
Goes
old
back to the
that old
morals.
law, because God really does look like a horrible, evil dick. I'm sorry. He's just the worst. He's just the worst being ever.
I love how Mr.deity is so pissed with the Bible himself. I love those shows when he's like, why did they do that to me? He's like so disappointed with the Bible.
He's unhappy that he didn't get final edit, and he's not getting any royalties. That's basically what it comes down to. Money. Money.
And finally, in the end, we finished this season 1, and I would love to maybe you tell us a little bit more about what are the future plans and what you would like people to give more attention on your own YouTube channel. What do you think is like my masterpieces?
I have one piece that is actually done very, very well. It's kind of my magnum opus in terms of anti-theism. It's called Fundamentalist Atheist, and it's a good 20 minutes long or so, but it's probably the single best statement of what I think about religion that you could go to. The God Distraction
You
series.
still an apatheist?
Sorry, say that again.
Are you still an apatheist?
An apatheist, yes. I still call myself an apatheist. In fact, that's what my whole God Distraction series is about. It's subtitled, I Don't Care If God Exists and Neither Should You. And I go through reasons for that. There are more episodes of that coming up. I'm trying to actually get all the material gathered from that to actually create a book. I have a company that wants to do a book on that series. The other series now that I've recently started doing, as you mentioned already, is Prager FU, which is taking the Prager University videos, particularly the ones on religion, and pointing out what's problematic in all of those. And there are a lot of problems. It's just it's like shooting fish in a barrel. Sometimes it's so easy. It's just weird to me. It's weird to me that people think that way. It's weird to me that I ever thought that way, because I did. And, I think that's one of my strengths, is that I kind of get the other side because I've been there. I understand it, and I have a lot of empathy, and I don't look down on religious people because I was one of them,
Mhm.
at a certain point, and I know how you can get into it, and I know how hard it is to get out of it. So I have a lot of empathy for people who are still in it.
When we talk about the freedom of religion, it's because we would like other people to reach the point that we did, that to get free and be happier.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Without religion. And I actually on a little paper that I have that is "Be Free, Be Happy," and it kind of a little bit on that movement. Are you more into like Hitchens and to say, even if you're an apatheist, when you look at reality, the lack of evidence kind of tends you to believe there is no God, in a more anti-theist, that God probably doesn't exist? Could you put like that, or are you still more into like, no, I'm still waiting for the evidence?
Well, as you know, my whole series is about the fact that even if God exists, there's nothing we can know about such a being. We can't know about that being's character. We can't know about that being's will, especially when you add in stuff like, I mean, in the Christian idea of things, there's another supernatural agent who's going around trying to deceive us all the time. So whatever, every religion thinks that every other religion has been deceived by that deceiver. And the question is, you're not the one that's been deceived? How do you know that the one that's deceived doesn't look back at you in the mirror every morning? So the problem with religion, especially when you add in the supernatural means you can't falsify anything. Anything is possible. Everything is possible. That makes knowledge completely impossible, because if you can't rule things out, you can't narrow the field of what is. That's how we do science. We eliminate the other possibilities, and what we're left with is the likely probability of what is true in those given circumstances. So you can't even do that in religion. So the question is, why does anyone care when we can't know anything about any of it? You're just going to do all of this based on someone telling you, and that's what it really comes down to. It's someone telling you, either through the written word or some other one, someone preaching. It's somebody else giving you their ideas of things. And
so I think it's not even just because of the unfalsifiable claim that actually falls back into like the burden of proof relies on whoever makes the special claim, but more likely, I normally talk about this when people come with the claims on aliens, that there are aliens and that people or even the own aliens are trying to hide themselves from us. It falls back into aliens. Why I would try so hard to find something that is trying to hide itself, doesn't want to be found, doesn't want to be seen? It's like it feels useless in that sense. Definitely. You have talked a lot about objective morals, and maybe you could be that guy to lead people and atheists for this talk on objective morals and standards. And like, I don't know, what is your insight? You still have like lots of projects to come, no?
Quite frankly, I'm not sure about using the term objective morality. I think our morality is very much like our science, in that it is provisional. It's that we understand that this is good as we've defined good, and you have to remember that our definition of good isn't necessarily the same definition that somebody else has. I'm doing a video on this right now. Sam's idea of well-being for the religious, it's about well-being in the next life, which is going to last a lot longer than this life. So this life is not prioritized in terms of well-being, and that's why the world went to hell for so long. It's because they didn't give a crap about this world. If you're going to prioritize well-being in this world, I think there are ways to go about that. And I like Sam's approach in terms of using science to understand the aids in human well-being and flourishing. And I think that is a question that can be answered by science. But I'm always reminded that even in science, we know nothing. We know nothing with any certainty. Like whatever we think we know today, tomorrow someone could come out and say, we found this and it completely topples this. Now there's a lot of stuff that's very secure. No one's probably ever going to do that with gravity, although we may come to another understanding of gravity. It's not going to overturn it completely, but we could come to understandings of gravity that aid us in superseding the force, or using it to our benefit a little better, or whatever. But everything is provisional. So given what we learn, and I like that idea, because what it means is no one has the right to say this is absolutely right, this is absolutely wrong, because the second you start doing that, you get married to a position which you may learn later is not the right position. And then what do? You have to have that flexibility of a certain level of, I don't know if subjectivity is the right word, but certainly provisionality is the correct idea, is that given these things, this is the right course. But if we find out these things aren't we were wrong about these things, this course may be the right course. So we have to remain, and we have
go ahead.
Our minds and our compassion and our empathy. And basically morality is basically just about opening the circle of concern bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what we've been doing, for the last 400 years, largely because of science.
Yeah, no, I actually like one of the atheist memes to say like, oh wow, you really need God to tell you that it's wrong to kill other people, or to steal. And I actually envision, I dream of having some type of a leader on objective morality, speaking like, I've tried several times talking to Yaron Brook, because he's very on Ayn Rand and she's very individualist and objectivism. I think it's a little bit what the only person that I have seen saying like this was actually George Carlin, the comedian, and nobody actually used his sketch to bring that to more objective moral values and reduce the 10 commandments to 2.
Right.
And but I have mentioned that morals came much before the Bible and God's itself. I like to say like my parents never indoctrinate me and my siblings in religion, so they try to teach morals with just saying don't do to other people what you'd not like to do to yourself, other people to do to you, and that brings like just the 2 commandments that would be like don't kill, don't steal, don't take other people's properties. Is all about the individual rights that you should respect this line, this of the individual rights. So I feel a little bit that doesn't need that big list of commandments like the Bible tries to display, mainly considering that most of them are related to praise God, but to expose how the religious values are not objective and are so arbitrary and manipulated. My first interview here was with a Brazilian comedian that is Pastor Adélio. He dated a character that is an evangelical pastor that only speaks the truth. So he actually, in the end of each video, that he explores some cultural relativism on the Bible, he's a real example of some pastor that abused minors or did some other terrible thing, killed someone in some ritual, and justified by the Bible's passages. And it's very interesting, and that's the most important thing, because so many people still hold the title of being religious because of the excuse of values, and moral standards. So, and I think a lot of people still hold this status, and that's why we need to talk so much about it.
I agree. I said the very thing in the latest video that I just released about how wresting morality from the religious is probably the single most important thing we can do.
What is the frequency of you releasing? Because I have seen like it's at least once a week or more even. I
basically release 4 videos a month, usually 1 a week.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy project, because I like to write them and have them be well written, and I like to put in the funny little comments that I add in, or photos. A lot of times I spend time creating photos just takes me a ridiculous amount of time to do what I want to do. I used to be a graphic designer, so I'm a Photoshop guru of sorts. So it's not, I mean, I know what I'm doing, but I did a Prager FU where they had a baseball guy talking about free will instead of a philosopher. And I thought it was so ridiculous that they'd put out a former baseball coach or something talking about such a heavy topic. And I ended up making baseball cards of all the four horsemen, I think. I don't think I did Dawkins. But I have a great one of Sam Harris, a baseball card of Sam Harris, a baseball card of Dan Bennett. That's my favorite one. He pitches, apparently. And it looked amazing. It looked great. And then I had one of Christopher Hitchens, which he would be rolling. He's probably rolling in his grave that I did that. I made a baseball card. He's in a hat and all of this stuff. And so much time doing those things, sometimes it just nearly kills me.
That's amazing. How people can get to follow you?
Well, Mr.deity is the channel on YouTube, MisterDeity. And then on Patreon, if you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/Mr.deity, no period, MRDEITY. On Facebook, I just do my own name, Brian Keithon. You can follow me there. I used to have a Mr.deity fan page, but it just got, I got caught up between whether I want to be voicing my own views or Mr.deity's, and since we haven't been doing much with Mr.deity for a long time, I've kind of abandoned that. And I think I have a Twitter still that I think reflects my Facebook. Whatever I put on Facebook, I think it goes onto my Twitter. But I hate the Twitterverse probably more than anything. Twitterverse drives me nuts. So
it's all about fighting controversies, and it's not an inviting environment.
It's really not.
It's true. So I only can thank you so much for time, attention, coming here, and thank you very much everybody to watch, and go check on Mr.deity. Thank you very much.